Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study through the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are currently in Genesis chapter 18, and this is going to be a fascinating chapter in that the prayer that Abraham prays is amazing. All right, so let's get into it. It says, then the Lord appeared to Abraham, and notice he's now Abraham, not Abram, okay? The Lord appeared to Abraham at the oaks of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance of the tent during the heat of the day. He looked up, and he saw three men standing near him. And when he saw them, he ran from the entrance of the tent to meet them and bowed to the ground. Then he said, my Lord, if I found favor in your sight, please do not go past your servant. Let a little water be brought, and you may wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. I will bring a bit of bread so you may be strengthened, that you may strengthen yourselves. This is why you pass your servant's way. Later, you can continue on. Yes, they replied, do as you have said. Now, this is what, in theological terms, what they call a theophany. Now, you don't have to. We're not going to get too far in theology, but it is kind of an interesting kind of term as it fits here. A theophany is simply an appearance of God that God takes upon a human form, and this is what Abraham is seeing. And as Abraham is looking at the men, they appear as men, and you will see it will become apparent to him that they are more than men, that this is the Lord God himself. Okay. Verse 6. So Abraham hurried into the tent and said to Sarah, quick, knead 3 measures of fine flour and make bread. Meanwhile, Abraham ran to the herd, got a tender choice calf. He gave it to the young men, who hurried to prepare it. Then Abraham took curds and milk and the calf, and he prepared and set them before the men. He served them as they ate under the tree. Now, one thing probably of note is probably here that Abraham is kind of serving the men himself, when normally he just would have had his servants do it. Okay, so this kind of indicates that he probably realized these are more than men, and so he's kind of attending to it himself. Verse 9, where is Sarah your wife? They asked him. There in the tent, he answered. The Lord said, I will certainly come back to you in about a year's time, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent behind him, and Abraham and Sarah were old and getting on in years, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. And we also, let's keep this in mind, Sarah never could have children. So she laughed to herself, after I have become shriveled up, and my and my Lord is old, will I have a delight? So Sarah's about around 89 years old at this time. But the Lord asked Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, can I really have a baby when I'm old? Is anything impossible for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will come back to you, and in about a year, she will have a son. Sarah denied. I didn't laugh, she said, because she was afraid. But he replied, no, you did laugh. Kind of interesting that you. Now, again, remember, it's kind of hard to say how, in terms of how they are viewing this, because what you see again is 3 men in human form, and it becomes clear now that it is God taking upon a human form. Sarah's laugh, by the way, and the reason why the Lord sort of rebuked her, was she did doubt. Now, if you kind of go back and remember, they had always been used to doing things in human terms. Remember, this is why you had Ishmael, and because we're going to fulfill God's promise in a human way. God is continually saying no. The statement is anything too hard for the Lord. Let me just kind of throw this in like a sidebar. Apply this statement almost to any questions you may get concerning the Bible in God. And think about this. There are people who say, how can there be a Noah's Ark or a talking snake? And they could just go on and on and on and on. Well, the question becomes, how big is their God? Is there anything too hard for the Lord? Let's see. Let's go to verse 16. Now the men got up from there and looked out over Sodom, and Abraham was walking with them to see them off. Then the Lord said, should I hide what I'm about to do from Abraham? Abraham is to become a great and powerful nation, and all the nation of the earth will be blessed in him. For I have chosen him so that he will command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. This is how the Lord will fulfill to Abraham what he had promised him. Now, this becomes kind of a model how God deals with prophets. Abraham was labeled a prophet. He's going to be called a prophet. We're going to see this again. Shall I hide from Abraham, or the prophet, we could even say. Okay. Verse 20. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is immense, and their sin is extremely serious. I will go down to see if what they have done justifies the cry that has come up to me. If not, I will find out. In the next chapter, where we're going to deal with Sodom, this prayer here, which is extremely important. Sodom and Gomorrah has become, understand, at this time, Sodom is just a city. When I say just a city, there are laws called sodomy laws. The sin of Sodom, you could say, how people look at the sin of Sodom, and basically homosexuality. We'll get to that later in the next chapter, in chapter 19. But the sin of what God is saying here, this city, and remember, Sodom and Gomorrah was a metropolitan area that the metropolitan area of several cities, but several hundred thousands of people here, that they had totally given themselves over to sin. So it just wasn't really just one sin. The reason why people always associate homosexuality, okay, as the sin, because it was part of the story, and we will see this in the next chapter. There is a bigger sin that was bigger. Okay, let me see if I can. I'm gonna read it, and it's found in Ezekiel Chapter 16. And God is at this point has judged Israel. The deportation process has been going on for several years. But this is what God says. I'm just going to read this one verse here. Verse 49 says, "Now this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, plenty of food, and comfortable security, but didn't support the poor and the needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. So I removed them when I saw this." And so this is what we're going to see here. God is coming down to begin this judgment against Sodom and Gomorrah. It's not just homosexuality. It is the ungodly nature of the entire city. In other words, it was more than that. They did all kinds of detestable things. We're going to see this later on with the golden calf incident. One of the things about the golden calf, when Moses came down from the mountain and he said the people, they were just unrestrained. So it wasn't just, it was a one big lewd orgy that was going on in worship to the calf. Okay, so there was a whole bunch of sins going on. Sodom and Gomorrah had gotten so bad that God says, "I'm going to judge them." And by the way, the entire region was bad. And it wasn't, again, so God wasn't just saying homosexuality here. It was a whole scope of things. Now, as he's talking, however, Abraham kind of realized, nephew's there. So let's see how this goes. Verse 22 says, "The men turned from there and went toward Sodom while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Abraham stepped forward and said, 'Will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there is 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away instead of sparing the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people who are in it? You could not possibly do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. You couldn't possibly do that. Won't the judge of all the earth do what is just?' Then the Lord said, 'If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake.'" Now keep that in mind here. I want you to see this. That's an amazing statement. I mean, the reason why I'm saying this is because you hear people now decrying or saying how God is going to judge America. We're not nowhere as near as close as Noah's flood, the time of Noah's flood, and Sodom and Gomorrah here. In other words, what people miss when they say that God is going to judge, and they're looking at all of the sins that that's going on in our nation, and there are sins going on in our nations. The mistake is you forget the mercy of God. Now, this is an astounding statement here that he said, "If I find 50 righteous people," notice what he said here, "I will spare the entire city." Now that's deep. I will spare the entire city for the 50 righteous. So despite what you see what's going on in America, right? Are there 50 righteous people in America? How many righteous people are there in America? See, people sometimes look at the wrong thing, and of course you mischaracterize God when you do that. All right, so verse 27, "Then Abraham answered, 'Since I have ventured to speak to the Lord, even though I am but dust and ashes, suppose the 50 righteous lack 5, will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? He replied, 'I will not destroy it if I find 45. Then he spoke to him again. 'Suppose 40 are found there.' He answered, 'I will not do it on the account of 40. Then he said, let the Lord not be angry, and I will speak further. Suppose 30 are found there. He answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. Then he said, since I have ventured to speak to the Lord, suppose 20 are found there. He replied, I will not destroy it on the count of 20. Then he said, let the Lord be angry, and I will speak one more time. Suppose 10 are found there. Suppose 10 are found there. And he answered, I will not destroy it on the count of 10. And when the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he departed, and Abraham returned to his place. Now again, a very fascinating prayer or intercession here, right? He's praying. So the biggest thing to me, that people who are decrying the judgment, are you praying for God's mercy? See? And it's kind of funny because this kind of prayer also is like how they would negotiate in deals, okay? You know, back and forth, you know. But this is a prayer. And what is, again, amazing here is that notice God said he would spare the entire city if he found 10. Now, what I don't understand, what is not being brought out here, is why did Abraham stop at 10? I mean, that's, you know, we just don't know. You know, we could speculate, but we don't know. It becomes apparent that God would have had mercy if he had said 8, because there were 8 righteous. There was, or 6. I forget. No, it wasn't 8. I'm thinking about Noah and his sons, but it was actually, it was Noah and, not Noah, Lot, his wife, 2 daughters, and then there were two, we'll see this in the next chapter, that there were 2 sons-in-law. But they stop at 10. He stops at 10. We're not given the reason why. But what is amazing about this is that notice he said that he would spare the city for 10 righteous people. That's why I say it's foolishness then when you see all this, well, God is going to judge America. People have said such nonsense that the reason why Trump wasn't elected to a second term was because God is going to judge America. In other words, we don't deserve Trump. Okay, I kid you not. There are Christians who have said nonsense enough of that. But the bigger thing is, see, notice the power of intercessory prayer, of the prayer of the righteous. What is going to be interesting is that Lot will be saved, not the city, but Lot would be saved because of the prayer of Abraham. Now, what is also amazing is that because Lot is righteous, look how close they came to being saved. Like I say, we don't know why Abraham didn't go down to, what if you find one righteous person? I don't know. It stops there and God walks away. But we should never, ever, ever, ever underestimate the fact that God has put us in places as righteous people in the Lord, that our prayers don't avail. Abraham's prayer almost saved an entire metropolitan city of extremely wicked people. That's the power of the righteous prayer and the righteous. All right, guys, we'll get into the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah in the next chapter. I'll see you then. All right.